So she picks me up, we go to Subway, and as she's getting out of the car, I stay in the car, and she kind of gets back in and says, what's going on? What's the deal here? I didn't think it meant that much to you. And I just said, I just need to know, you know, what do I have to do to get back together with you? How can we get back together? And she says, we'll never get back together. And I thought, oh my gosh, the nerve of this girl. Like, I mean, like stroke my back when you tell me, like let me down easy. And she just says, no, we'll never get back together. And I just remember feeling crushed. And she says, until. And then I, of course, perked up and thought, okay, well, now, okay, what do I have to do here? And she says, until you become the man of God that I know you want to be and that I know He wants you to be. Because she was the only I was able to share, all of my deepest and darkest secrets, about what, my passion for kids and the youth and just the things that I wanted to do in life and really what I thought about Christianity and that sort of thing and my fears and about wanting to go to the Olympics and how I didn't think I was going to make it. I mean, she knew the real Bryan Clay, and that's who she fell in love with, but that's not who I was at the time. And so she tells me this, and of course you would think any good Christian, young man would think, oh, wow, this would be life-changing for them. And for me, instead of doing that, I got upset. And I thought, wow, the nerve of this girl, she's going to use God as a cop-out. Typical Christian girl using God as a cop-out. And so I was really upset. And I knew enough, even though I wasn't walking right alongside of Christ, I knew enough about Christianity that I knew that you weren't supposed to judge, and that if I did decide to follow Christ, it was something that I was going to do in my heart, and not something that I had to go and profess to everybody in the whole world. And so I thought, okay, well, what can I do? How can I get her to at least let me know if there's a shot or if there isn't of us getting back together? And so I said, well, how will you know? And I thought, I've got her trapped. She's going to have to either, judge me, or she's going to have to like say that I have to do it. And I thought, I'll get her on that. And she kind of just looked at me and she said, I'll know. And I was like, well, that's not good enough. I'm a guy, I need a goal. Like, give me 3 things or 4 things to do. I'll make sure that I hit them and we'll get back together and everything will be great. And she said, no, I mean, I'll just know. And I remember we didn't eat that day because I was upset. And so she took me back to my apartment and dropped me off. And I remember sitting there. But when this happened, I remember I started to think about things. And I have already struggled with a little bit of depression when I was younger, probably in 5th or 6th grade when my parents were going through a divorce. And I got to the point where I was thinking to myself, what would people say about me if I wasn't here? Or better yet, if I was dead, you know? And I just wasn't happy with where I was at. I was almost kicked out of school for some of the decisions I was making. I wasn't doing well at track at all. And I remember the only thing I could think of was people would say, oh, I remember Bryan Clay. He was a really good athlete. And then I started thinking about that, and I was like, well, that's kind of superficial. That's not even, I mean, that's not what I want people to remember about me. And then I thought to myself, and the fact of the matter is I'm not even that good of an athlete, so even that's a lie. So for me, the reality was there was nothing anybody would say about me if I wasn't there anymore. And that hit me pretty hard. And so I started reading my Bible because that was the only place I knew to go to possibly find some answers. And I wasn't even sure if I'd find answers there. Started reading my Bible and decided I needed to become a disciple of someone, and I started thinking through the list, and I didn't know any men in my life that I could say good things about when they weren't there. And so I went down the list of coaches and everybody else, and I finally found a guy, Terry Franson, who was an old track and field coach at my school. And I decided that because I knew what people said about him when he was out of the room, that's who I was going to go and try to be like, so that people would say those things about me. And we started meeting and talking, and I joined a devotional group. And my walk really started to get to a place where I was thinking, okay, I'm doing good here. I was getting up early and reading my Bible before class and before breakfast, and I was going to church again, and I was meeting with what we called a D group, a devotional group of guys that we were just getting together and walking through life together. And I thought, man, this is going great. And Sarah started talking to me again, and we started hanging out and almost started dating and stuff again, and it was just going great. And right when I thought everything was just perfect, of course God had another plan for me, and I'm at a track meet, and a girl from my past walks up and she says, hey, we need to chat. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. I'm competing. Don't bother me. And she's like, no, we really need to chat. And I thought, oh my goodness, like what could this girl possibly want? And she says, I've got some bad news. And I'm like, okay, well, what is it? And she goes, well, I've got an STD. And I'm like, well, what does that have to do with me? And she goes, well, that means you've got it. And my whole world came to a screeching halt at that moment in time. I mean, I couldn't tell you, I don't know what was going on. I just know that I walked over to my coach and I told him, I said, Coach, I can't compete. I told him what happened. He said, go home, get things figured out. So I went home that day, and it was a Friday. I remember it was a Friday. I got on the phone and I got on the internet and I started doing research and trying to find out what it was and what it meant. And I mean, I couldn't get any answers, and I called the health center, at our school, and tried to set up some time for me to go get tested. I mean, they were closed, so I had Saturday, Sunday. They'd be back open on Monday, but the doctor wasn't going to be there. He wasn't going to be there till Tuesday, and so I had the whole weekend to wrestle with this. And I mean, I was scared. I was scared. I didn't know if I was going to be able to have kids. I didn't know if Sarah, who I just started getting back together with, I mean, I had intentions of marrying this girl. I didn't know if she'd ever marry me. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember as I was sitting there and I was angry with God, and I was saying, how dare you do this to me now? How dare you take everything away, that I've worked so hard for? I'm doing everything that you've asked me to do. I'm reading my Bible. I'm praying. I've rededicated my life to you. I'm meeting with a devotional group. I've got a mentor. I mean, I'm doing everything that you asked me to do. How dare you come and take this away from me now? And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, my life is never going to be the same. I mean, if I do ever become famous from track and field, I remember thinking I'll only be famous because I'll probably have to do some like ointment cream commercial, and that's all I'm going to be known for. I'll be the guy like, hey, um, and everybody always laughs when I say that, but that was real, real things that were going through my head. I mean, I was scared, and like I said, I had dreams of having a family and a wife, and I mean, I had all these things, and now my life was looking very, very different. I was looking at, I mean, for me, it had already happened, and so my life at this point was going to be very different, and it was not what I wanted. And so as I'm here, throwing my Bible against the wall, and I'm yelling at God, and I'm in my dark dorm room by myself, middle of the night. It was probably around Sunday night, actually maybe early morning, Monday morning at 2, maybe 3 in the morning. I remember sitting there just broken. I mean, absolutely broken. And I remember thinking to myself, again, how dare you? And I remember God responding to me, just quietly, but very, very clearly. And I remember him saying, Bryan, how dare you think that just because you have given your life to me and you're doing all the things I've asked you to do, how dare you think that you don't have to pay the consequences of some of the decisions that you made beforehand? And I'm a very literal person, and so, I remember thinking to myself, if Jeffrey Dahmer or somebody like that came to know the Lord while they were in jail, it's not like they would turn them loose and say, hey, great, we love it, have fun, we forgive you. I mean, you still have to pay the consequence. And so I remember feeling about this big, sitting in my room thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I've misunderstood, my faith and my religion and God's role, and I can't believe how selfish I am, and how, I mean, just all these things. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, as I'm thinking that I'm at rock bottom, I said, okay, Lord, if I never get married, if I can't have a family, if all I'm known is for this ointment commercial that I'm going to end up doing, if nothing that I have ever dreamed of happening ever happens, and if all of my friends at the time leave me because all I do is hang out at church on Sundays for fun, and they don't want to do that, and I don't go out and have a good time or anything, if I'm the loneliest person on the planet, I said, I guess it'll just be me and you. And that was my prayer. That was all it was. I guess it'll just be me and Lord. And I gave up. I mean, I just couldn't go anymore. And I remember at that moment, for the first time in my life, I turned away from everything I was doing, and I ran in the opposite direction. I've been running in that direction ever since. And it's been an absolute, ride for me. I mean, it's just been great. But of course, I'm not perfect, and I struggle, and I have hard times and those types of things. But I'm doing the best that I can, and like I talk about in my book, I say, God's shown me very, very clearly that He doesn't ask me to be perfect. He just wants me to give my best, and He'll make that good enough. And that's kind of what I'm learning right now, and I've just been doing the best job I can.
Well, here's a follow-up that we forgot to talk about in the first service. You did get tested.
Yes, I forgot again. Shoot. Um, I did get tested. I went in on Tuesday, and the doctor kind of said, you know, had me explain the situation. He kind of laughs, and he's like, trust me, you're fine. You don't have to worry about a thing. He's like, but if you want me to test you, I will. And I said, just test me just to make sure. And he tested me, and everything turned out just fine. And so it all worked out great. And I remember, literally, I remember walking out of the office, and it was one of those moments where I felt like I had the little angel on one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder, and the angel sitting there going, whew, man, thank you, Jesus, and the little devil on the other side's going, wow, we dodged a bullet on that one. You got worried for nothing. We can just go back to doing what we were doing. And it was like, again, I had to reassure myself as I'm walking out, like, okay, what am I going to do here? And I remember thinking, not a chance will I ever go back to that. And I again just reaffirmed the fact that I was going to be living a different life from that point on. So it was pretty rough time for me.
Aren't you guys glad he's running in the right direction now? Oh, amen. Well, we can only imagine the pressure that you must face, in the Olympic trials. And I think there was an experience as you were preparing for the 2008 Olympic trials where God really kind of spoke to you and gave you some strength. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was 2008 Olympics and 2008 Olympic trials. I mean, I always tell people, to give you an idea of the stress that you're under, I'm not trying to be just the best in, let's say, Green Acres Church or the best in, my city, Tyler, or something like that. I'm not trying to be the best in the state of California, the state of Texas. I'm not even trying to be just the best in the country. I mean, I'm trying to be the best in the world. And I don't know, is there anybody else out here that is under anything like that? I mean, there's only one spot for that. They only give one gold medal out, and that is just hugely, hugely stressful. I felt like I had the weight of Hawaii, the state of Hawaii where I grew up, on my shoulders. And I remember sitting down with my wife and telling her, if I don't win this gold medal, you may have to go get a job, and I may have to go get a real job, and life could look very, very different for us. I mean, I was for the longest time, I felt like God was telling me, this is what I want you to do. Here's what I'm going to do for you, and this is why I'm going to do it. And I was even questioning that. If I didn't win the gold medal, does that mean maybe that was Satan that was talking to me instead of the Lord? I mean, just everything in my life was just in doubt and going to look different if I didn't win this gold medal. And so there was a lot of pressure. And I remember sitting down with my pastor, telling him, I wish God would sit with me, just come sit down and say, Bryan, I've got it all under control. Don't worry. You will win the gold medal. I promise you, I've got it figured out. Here's how it's going to happen. All you need to do is this, this, and this, and this. And I told him, I said, and the funny thing is, even if he did, I'm sure that I would still doubt. I'd still walk away from that meeting and be like, I don't know, Jesus, I know you said that, but I'm just not sure. So it was just a hugely stressful time in my life, but the way that I got through that for me was my faith. I mean, falling back on my faith. And I know that sounds maybe like the cliche thing to say, but it really was the ability to kind of give it up and say, okay, Lord, I can't deal with this anymore. You take it. And for the ability to be ministered to through music and things like that just helps center me and help me focus and remember what's important in life. All those things freed me up so that I could go out to the track and I could do the things that I needed to do. I could get into what us athletes call the zone. I could just get in there when everything can get shut out, and you can just you can see all the little things and make all these little adjustments when you're flying by something. And so my faith was a huge part of me preparing for that Olympic Games. And there is absolutely no way, without having the faith that I've had and the people that God have put in my life to surround me, there's no way I would have done what I've been able to do at the Olympic Games. I would have crumbled under the pressure.